use that money for a subscription to Fairymount Plus.
The Fairly OddParents, once one of the most beloved Nickelodeon cartoons, has since been put through the ringer over the years, from having a rather shady creator, to overstaying its welcome, resulting in one of the worst cases of seasonal rot in animation history, to both awful live-action CGI hybrid movies that were generally hated, even by die-hard fans of the series. Now, you'd think after all of this, it'd be best to let this franchise die. However, as long as there's a slight chance to make a profit out of a familiar IP, you'll bet that studios will continue to beat that dead horse by creating yet another depressingly soulless incarnation. And the result is this corporate mess of a show. Fairly OddParents, Fairly Odder, a live-action / animation hybrid show, because that worked out so well the last time this franchise used that style. Needless to say, the Fairly OddParents Fairly Odder became a hot topic amongst animation fans, as it was the perfect storm of controversial showrunners, terrible business practices, and an ever so long list of flaws that results in an atrocious reboot that defies sanity itself. So buckle up, as things are about to get messy, as I deliver my take on the Fairly OddParents Fairly Odder. So the premise of this series is that Timmy Turner is now a fully grown adult and is about to attend college. And so he decides to gift his very odd parents Cosmo Wanda to his cousin, Bib, who has just moved into Dimsdale after her father marries his old high school sweetheart. From there, the series follows Bib and her new stepbrother Roy as they get into wacky situations that result from the wishes that they make to Cosmo Wanda. So if you've seen any Nickelodeon or Disney sitcom during the 2010s, then you would be familiar with the general style of Fairly Odder. Granted, I myself would only watch any of these shows if there was literally nothing else on. And even then, these sitcoms would be the equivalent of white noise. And unfortunately, Fairly OddParents Fairly Odder has many of the same elements as the previous sitcoms that came before it, from the low-grade acting, bland characters, cliched plots, and jokes that fall flat. One aspect of the premise to the show that bothers me is the fact that this is supposed to be a direct continuation of the original series, with the first scene showing a bunch of clips from the original series, along with a narrator talking about Timmy's adventures with Cosmo Wanda. This comes across as strange considering that this is a live-action series. Then again, Timmy does fake an animated fairy after the compilation. So, does this mean this universe was actually live-action this whole time, and it being animated was a lie? Well, I guess my childhood is ruined now. But wait a minute, if that is the case, then why are the fairies still animated, along with Fairy World? Okay, the world building here is just ridiculous and confusing. Anyway, I guess the next thing to address is the show's theme song. One really confusing thing about it is that it only comes when about a third of the episode is over, rather than after the opening scene, which is just baffling, as it comes in long after the point you expect to see it. So it feels as if it was just shoved in at the last minute, which is pretty awkward. And while we're still on the subject of this theme song, I gotta say, it's straight up awful. It attempts to be a reimagined version of the original theme song, with a similar melody and vocals, but with completely different lyrics. However, the new lyrics for this song were clunky, and therefore the vocals don't flow as well as they did in the original. Plus, this new theme song lacks the feeling of childlike wonder and imagination that the original had, especially towards the end where a bunch of wishes are made, and the lack of creativity is quite clear. Also, do I really need to mention how awkward these live-action characters look alongside this animation? Okay, moving on. So the plot format for each episode in this series is just about the same as the original Fairly OddParents, where the main characters make a wish to solve whatever issue they're facing, only to go through the unexpected consequences, forcing them to fix the problem they created and learn from the experience. And then just rinse and repeat this formula for 13 episodes. But whereas the original series had elevated this predictable format, with its creativity, relatable situations, and fun characters, there is something special Fairly Odder does to stand out, resulting in the show quickly becoming dull and tiresome. Another major aspect of this show that fails at every turn is the humor, which was so painfully unfunny. Both the setup and payoff to each and every joke was incredibly weak, and with comedy being such a massive presence, the whole show suffers, feeling empty and boring. Anyway, now that that's out of the way, let's move on to the show's characters. So, the cast of characters include, of course, the Fairly OddParents themselves, Cosmo and Wanda, and are still portrayed the same way as they were in the original Fairly OddParents series. And by that I mean the later seasons, unfortunately, with Cosmo being a brain-dead moron and Wanda being a nag. Another weird thing about them in this show is that despite Fairly OddParents being in the title, Cosmo and Wanda are barely in it. Whereas in the original series, Cosmo and Wanda were a constant presence. They barely appear in Fairly Odder. They only show up for brief moments a couple of times per episode, before immediately leaving for whatever random reasons that the plot comes up with to force them out of the story. In fact, after a long stretch of a generic sitcom plot, I end up forgetting that this is a Fairly OddParents show, so when they do finally show up again, I'm like, oh yeah, those two exist. And of course, their relationship is still as stellar as it was in the later seasons of the original show. And the attempt to make it comedic fails miserably. Not even their interactions with Bib and Roy are all that interesting or impactful, which is a shame because their relationship with Timmy was such an integral part of the original series. And then you have the human characters, starting off with Bib, the awkward new girl who wants to fit in. She's also into books and Shakespeare, but really that's just about it. That's all I got to say about her, as she's quite a generic and boring protagonist. There's also her new stepbrother, Roy, who is a bombastic and talented young boy who is idolized by everyone around him. Despite developing an ego from this, along with making selfish and reckless wishes, he does have a good heart and will do anything for his new stepsister.
Why would you even care if I did? Because I've always wanted a sibling.
Although he is usually just as uninteresting as Bib. Next is Bib's dad Ty and Roy's mom Rachel, a newly married and eccentric couple who are passionate about ballroom dancing and run a dance studio together. You also have Bib's new best friend Xena, who is literally 2D 2.0 as she has an obsessive crush on Roy.
We got the shot. Isn't he gorgeous?
Now, to be fair, she is slightly toned down in comparison to 2D, and the show does attempt to give us some personality outside of her crush, but yeah, she is still quite crazy.
If you need me, I'll be wherever that headband landed.
I guess there is also Cassidy, who is a minor antagonist, as she is just a run-of-the-mill, mean popular girl who acts like a jerk to Biv, with nothing new added to subvert or elevate this overused archetype. Two other characters from the original Fairly OddParents series also make a return in Fairly Odder. First there's Becky, who is now a teacher at the school Bib and Roy attend, and she treats her students with the same cruelty she did when she babysat Timmy.
Shut up! Quit dancing! Quit prancing!
Also, Crocker makes an appearance in the two-part season finale, as the main villain that Bib and Roy must overcome. Unfortunately, neither of them is as entertainingly evil as they were in the original series. Just about every single character in this show comes across as really bland, mostly because it's a case of tell, don't show when it comes to their personalities. And even though some of these characters have the potential to be quite entertaining on paper, the poor writing and acting holds them back. And now, it is time to move on to the animation, which is probably the worst aspect of this entire show. In this live action and animation hybrid style, it's pretty clear that the animation received the shorter end of the stick. For example, Cosmo and Wanda barely feel like they're actually there in the scenes they appear in. The animation for these two also comes across as stilted, with no creativity in the effects whenever they use their magic. And finally, there were quite a few errors, such as this moment, where Cosmo is holding a megaphone, and it doesn't even cover his character outline. There's also a scene at the end of the show that takes place in the Fairly World prison that's fully animated, and it looks especially horrendous, as all of the basic principles of animation is just non-existent here, resulting in some of the choppiest animation I've ever seen in a mainstream show. Arcs, weight, overlapping action, none of that is present. Heck, there isn't even proper riff syncing, which, for a professionally made show for TV, this is an embarrassing woe.
I can hear your voiceover, and no you won't!
Clearly, this is a case of studio executives not caring about the animation, as it appears that only a small amount of money was given for its budget. And not only that, the animators were forced to complete all of the animation in a ridiculously short amount of time. And boy does it show! Okay, I think I just about covered everything. Now it is time for the conclusion. Yeah, there is no sugarcoating it. This show was an absolute disaster from beginning to end. While it has all the usual elements of a typical mediocre sitcom, there were also larger issues from the animation, writing, characters that made Fairly Odder a truly awful Reboot. Fairly Odd was just a weird and strange mess at every turn, and it's not even in a way that's entertainingly bad. While it may be a continuation, it simply doesn't feel like the original Fairly OddParents. Instead, this show is a nonsensical fever dream with the Fairly OddParents cheaply slapped on for the sake of brand recognition. Although it seems like this franchise is still ongoing, the sad and painful truth is that the show that many of us once loved has died a long time ago, and it should have been left that way. And that was my review of Fairly OddParents Fairly Odder. If you enjoyed this video, then be sure to give it a like and comment. Also, subscribe to my channel and hit the bell for notifications. Also, if you're interested in supporting my channel, then head over to my Patreon. Well, I got nothing else to say, so see ya!